All right, in this video, we are going to continue working on the little Mexican bowl that I'm going to be using with my avocado and the fruit that I've made in Mudbox. So at the moment, I have been working with my model. I have modeled it. It's still a low poly. However, I got the basics. I have the object now. The UV maps are laid out so that they flow, so that things flow nicely across the surface. And now I'm ready to send it over to Mudbox. So what I'm going to do is, there's a couple ways that we can do this. We can save the object. So one of the things that you want to do, and something I haven't done yet, but I should have done from the very beginning, is create a project file. So I'm going to say project window. I'm going to say new. I'm going to call this Mexican bowl. And I'm going to save it within my, my directory where I want this to go. So I have a directory set up inside of my GitHub account, so I can update all my information to GitHub. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to save this file, accept, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this scene inside of that file, inside of the scenes folder. So I'm going to say Mexican bowl version 1. All right, and then I'm going to save it as a binary. Okay, so if I go and I look up that, I can find that in my Maya file under my Mexican bowl, and in that I'm going to have my scenes, and then there's my Mexican bowl file. Now, in that project folder, I'm going to want to put in all my source images and all that sort of stuff. So I have already done my research and I have found this bowl, but I've also found some textures. So I went on and I found some stone texture that I think might work nicely. I found some marble, some black sand that I think might work. I have some black marble that I might want to work with, as well as this has some nice browns and some whites, and then I have some light grays and some dark grays here, and I may use some of that too. So there's lots of little speckles and I can play with that material as well. So I can create some of my own custom materials. So here I am in Maya. And what I'm going to do is I could export this out. So if I said, and one of the things I like to do in my folder as I began to organize things, I'm going to make a folder for my OBJ files, because I'm going to do it as an OBJ. But I could also do it as an FBX. I can also have a mud file. So as I kind of work, I might make my different folders to export things into. So at this point, I have it selected. I think everything looks good. So I'm going to say File, and I'm going to say Export Selection, and I'm going to choose an OBJ file. And I could export things out as they've got STLs for 3D printing and all kinds of stuff. I'm going to just save it as an OBJ for now. And I'm just going to just keep the settings kind of the way they are, and do this. And I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to leave everything as is and see what I get here. So I'm going to go into my OBJs folder. I'm going to call this Mexican bowl version 1. So I can keep everything consistent. And I'm going to say, okay. Now, I'm going to go to Mudbox. Here's my Mudbox scene. And I'm going to close that. And I'm going to go in my OBJ folder. And here is my Mexican bowl. And so this is my materials node, and this is my OBJ. All right, so it's going to bring in the default Lambert material, which is a fine material to bring in. But we can also assign it something new as well. But for now, let's just see what we get if we bring this in. So I'm going to say I'm going to go and import, and I'm going to go to my folder here, and I'm going to go into GitHub, and my Maya folders, and my Mexican bowl, and scenes, and my OBJ, and I'm going to choose that and say open. So here it is. Here's that file. If I open up my wireframe, you can see there's the wireframe on it. And if I go up into my UV, you can see there's the actual object laid out right there. So the UVs are brought in. Everything looks very good. And I'm essentially not going to do too much with it. Actually, the bottom is flat, just the way that I wanted it at the moment. But I'm going to start subdividing this. I'm not going to do anything to it at this point, at this level, but I'm going to hit Shift-D, and it's going to start to subdivide. As you can see, Shift-D again. And then this is where I might want to start doing some small modifications and manipulations to the surface. One of the things I might want to do is flatten out some of the edges. I also might want to move it to the center of my world and bring it up above the grid. If I wanted to do that, I could go to my objects list. I could grab this. I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it Mexican Bowl version 1. And I'm going to select that object. I'm going to go down to my translate, and I have my translate tool, move it up above the axes here. I'm also going to look at it from the front view so that I can kind of see what I've got here, and bring it down and set it right there. And then I'm going to, oops, don't want to do that. I'm going to undo that movement here. And I move my camera around. I don't want to do that. All right, I'm going to move that back over here like so. I'm going to go back into my perspective camera, and I'm going to look down at my top view and move it over to this, translate it over in this direction. So I'm having a hard time getting a hold of it there. Let's go ahead and translate it 0 and 0. And I'm going to move it over so many units. Let's see what I can get here. Let's see if I can. All right, I'm going to go to my perspective view and look through it here, and then move things over a little bit. So I moved it back up, put it up here, and then move things over a little bit like so. All right, so I'm expecting this to be relative to the human. I'm hoping it is. If I were to create a human mesh, I'm expecting, yeah, that's pretty much what I expected. It's a pretty big bowl, and that's pretty relevant to the size of that human. It's not so bad. That's kind of what I was going for. So I'm happy with that. And so now I can kind of begin doing some work on it. So I brought it in, and what I want to start doing is, if I look at these reference images, I want to flatten that top edge down a little bit and flatten the feet down a little bit so that it is kind of, just worn down. So I'm going to begin making some of those low-level modifications to it. And I'm simply going to go to my sculpt tools and go to my flatten. And then I have the ability to kind of flatten this down, just like it says, the strength and size. So I'm just going to do a little test here and see what I get if I just flatten that down and see what it looks like. Yeah, so as I flatten down that surface, I can just kind of go around the top here and just flatten it down. Now, it doesn't have to be super equal, because at this level, but one thing I want to do, actually, before I do that, one thing that always you should do before you start modifying it is add that to your layers. So I have a sculpt layer. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say flatten. I'm going to say flatten the rim, and then I'll make another one where I flatten the feet. So I'm just going to look at this from the top. I'm going to go around the edge and just start flattening it down. I'm not too worried about making it perfect, because if it was handmade, it wouldn't be perfect anyway. So I'm just going to flatten this edge down and take a look at it. Can adjust the strength. This is a lot easier to do when you are working with a stylus of some sort. And I'm just going to flatten that, going over that. It's a lot easier to flatten it when you just paint right on it, which is what I'm doing right now. I have a monitor that I can paint on. So I'm going to just go ahead and just increase the strength a little bit. So I'm going to increase the strength up and go back over the surface and bear down a little bit harder on that edge, so I can kind of, I'm looking at the hardness. The more flat it is, the more white that is, because it's getting more light. This is a lot softer, so I know that that is more round. So I'm going to kind of look and see what it looks like. That's exactly what I'm doing. So I'm gauging the brightness of that edge, and I can kind of tell when I go over it that it's more flat in certain parts. So I'm just going to go over that. I'm not going to try to make it perfect. It's not a factory or something like that. And I'm happy with that. That gives me some nice uneven edges, which is, I think, characteristic of some of this. You can see some of these edges, maybe not perfect, but gives it some wear. And I'm also going to do the feet. So I'm going to go ahead and, just in case I want to go back and change one part, I'm going to say flatten feet. And I'm going to flip it upside down like so, and I'm going to go in and flatten out the foot nice and flat right there. I'm going to flatten out this one, and I'm taking my stylus pen and flattening that out, and I'm flattening this out too. I'm going to flip it over and see what it looks like, and that's kind of what I want. It's a little more at the edge, so I may want to step back and erase that. Let's see what happens if I can erase some of that. So what I want to do is maybe not go so much. Maybe I just want to flatten it in the middle versus the edge. So I'm going to bring that back up and go back to flatten. I'm going to just focus on flattening it here, and just in the middle, right here, and right here. So that'll make it a little bit more. I'm going to flatten this one down a little bit, and this one. I'm going to flatten this one, and this one, this one, and this one. There we go. It's not perfect, but it's okay. It's been worn, and it's going to be imperfect like that. So once I've done that, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to save this scene. Save my scene, but where am I going to save it? I'm going to save it in my mud file that I'm going to make right here. And I'm going to put it in that folder. And there's going to be Mexican Bull version 1.mud. So it wants me to add it myself. I'm going to say save. All right. Now that I have that, I'm going to subdivide some more. Shift D, Shift D, Shift D. Now I'm looking at some pretty hefty details. This is 120,000 faces. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the level of detail that I want, but this is where I'm going to start kind of laying in the stone texture. And this is going to be my base texture, which I'm going to be sculpting in. And I'm going to try to see what kind of level of effect I can get. Now, in my stencils, I've added some of those. This is the black sand file that I have. So I picked up a black sand file. Let me go right here. So this is a black sand file that I can use for texture. And I have a black marble for color. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be painting in the textures, some textures here. And I'm going to just see what kind of surface I'm going to get at this level of subdivision. Now, at this level of subdivision, those little dots are pretty darn big. And so I'm not expecting to be able to get too much out of it, but I thought I would at least give it a try. Now I'm also going to hide that. So I'm not going to get near the resolution that I want at this level. So I'm going to subdivide this down a little bit more. And once I get this kind of this level of, I'm going to delete this one because it's no longer valid. And I'll say stone texture here. And now I'm going to expect, oops, if I do start putting in some of that stone, I'm going to see it. So there it is. If I back off some of that, the power of this, the strength is down quite a bit. And if I go out, that's what it looks like. If I hold down Control and I push it in, that's what it looks like. And that's kind of what I'm going for. The stone has more of an inward grain than it does as a bump. So all these pits and divots are going, really kind of going into the surface. And at this point, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and I'm going to be kind of looking at it at that level. And so as I kind of paint, and I might end up not liking what I see here. And I may end up using something else, but I'm just going to kind of give it a try and see what I like. I'm going to turn off my wireframe so I can kind of see it a little bit. When I get too close, it just really distorts. But if I'm going to look at it like this is what it's going to look like, I'm going to be at a distance from it. So as I start to look at this object, oops, I'm going to kind of decide if this is the right thing. And then I need all my UVs and everything to be in the right spot so that I can paint this surface quality on there. And I can also increase, I can increase the pits and add even more, even at a bigger level. So I'm going to have lots of levels of, I'm going to have pits going in, pits going out. I can increase the level of my pits. No, that's too much. I got to remember to look over here because as I am doing that, that's just way too much. So what I'm showing you is still too much. Go way down. Still too much. There we go. That's better. So as I kind of start to layer in these pits and what I want, that's going to do a great job. I'm going to have this go over the surface. I really want to kind of bump up that lip like so as I go over it. And you can see, I'm going to hide that. You can see it does start to tear up that texture on that, tear up that texture on the edge, which is what I really want. So I'm just going to go through and really just try to make that edge look as bumpy and as messed up as I can, like this does. All right. So, and again, if I want to back it off on a whole, I can do so. I can back it off a little bit. And I'm going to just start painting that surface, just like I'm doing right here. And get that overall bump. All right. Now I'm doing kind of some on the, I'm doing some on the outside and some on the inside. So I'm going to have it bump out a little bit and also push it in a little bit. So I'm going to mix things up a little. All right, so I'm going to continue to work on this little bit by little bit, and hope you get the idea of what I am doing. So then, once I kind of have the basics like I'm doing here, go around and make sure I've got every part of it painted with the basics. Then I'm going to decide if I like it or not. Does this look the way that I want? If I do, I'll keep going. If I don't, then I will, I'll get rid of that layer and maybe try something else. Maybe do a different texture. I'm going to get this edge real nice. And one of the things that you want to do is, kind of stop a little bit once in a while. And so you can control Z back. I'm going to mess this up. So some of these areas are going to be real strong and some of them aren't. So I'm going to just kind of keep going with that. And once I have kind of the large stone, and I'm going to call that large, and then I can go and make another layer and I can say this will be my stone small. So these will be even more of a high frequency type of bumps. All right, so as I look at this kind of from the distance, I might want to add some more texture to it. And so I might also want to add something else. So as I kind of mix things up a little bit, I might want to add some more details. And so I'll just kind of, oops, no, don't like that. I'll just kind of look at some of these materials, don't like that, and see if there's anything that I want to add that might be valuable. I don't like it's not adding anything. So for now, I'm just going to kind of go with this. All right, so that's the basics. I'm going to just kind of continue working with that stone, kind of work with it a little bit, see if there's anything else I want to add, any other little pits or things that I might want to use. There's a texture that has a lot of little spots on it that I might want to use. Oh, here it is, I think. These spots. And this will kind of, if I enlarge this a little bit, it may give me some pits that I might want to add. Kind of like these irregular pits that you might see here, in here, this and this and this. These little lava marks, they're not perfect, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go add some of those. So I'm going to vary my mask. This can be kind of dense, and I might also use a stamp that does it kind of as an irregular mesh. So as I paint, it may not be. Now I'm going to hold down Control, push some of these in. I'm going to hide that, and if I add those holes, it's a little too regular, but I might add some of these things in, and I may just pop them in different places, just here and there, maybe on some edges like so. Maybe paint some in over here just to add a little bit of irregularity to it. Move it around and see if I like that. It's on a layer, so if I don't, I can just kind of move it. So if I move this over here and I do some things like that, I'm just kind of popping it in. I'm not worried too much about it if I'm going to put it in perfect. I could change the strength of mine, but I want it to be just kind of here and there. Might even make my brush bigger and see what I get if I do kind of a big, change my brush, the angle of mine. And I got some spots. I may or may not like that. I also might just reduce it down a little bit and just kind of back it off so it really isn't a spectacle. They're just kind of there irregularly. And again, it's kind of as additional pit marks and stuff within. I might want to put some in the middle here, so I might just keep hitting the wrong button. Get down control, throw some in there, throw some in here, throw some inside this. Make sure I've got them all over. All right, I'm going to say okay. Now I can continue to try to find things that I might want to do to rough up the surface. But for now, I'm going to be okay with just that. Maybe a little bit of noise on the surface to kind of bump it up, but not at this level. If I wanted to add some rough texture, I might go down to a different level and do it. But I think at this moment, I'm fairly happy with the way it's looking. So I'm going to control save my scene. And the next thing I'm going to do is paint it. So after this, I'm going to go ahead and paint.